Hello, you're watching Inside the Americas with me, Laura Cellier. Coming up in the programme. Should France follow the United States and bring in tough new laws to fight terrorism? We look at how the post-9/11 Patriot Act is affecting the lives of ordinary Americans. Plus, dozens of political prisoners freed in Cuba amid the new rapprochement with the United States. We ask, does this mark the beginning of a new era of political freedoms in Cuba? And the battle against the bulge. US authorities are urging fast food restaurants to come clean about calorie content. But first, does America have the answer when it comes to fighting terrorism? Following the murderous rampage here in Paris last week, some have been calling for France to implement its own version of the US Patriot Act. That's a package of laws that were brought into force in the wake of 9/11. Aurore Dupuy has been finding out what impact those laws have been having on the lives of ordinary American citizens.
The 9/11 attacks sent shockwaves across the planet and brought drastic security measures to the United States. 45 days later, President Bush signed the Patriot Act, 132 pages to help intelligence agencies, the FBI, the CIA and the NSA, to track down terrorists. But the text also had an impact on civil liberties.
People are detained for months without lawyers. Unthinkable.
Another issue, the status of enemy combatants. That's how detainees in Guantanamo Bay are considered. Today, 136 of them are still behind bars, stripped from basic rights in the name of national security. Airports are also placed on high alert. A simple passport isn't enough. Foreigners landing in the US have to give their fingerprints and a picture. There's also a no-fly list. Around 500,000 people aren't allowed to travel due to reasonable suspicions. These exceptional measures have never been revoked. In fact, they were reauthorized in 2006. But the full impact of the Patriot Act was revealed much later in 2013 when Edward Snowden leaked thousands of secret files. The world discovered how the NSA dramatically expanded its surveillance programs, regardless of whether the target was a suspected terrorist. Some analysts say the government is to blame.
The Bush administration made a number of secret and unilateral decisions to enhance surveillance without congressional input. And so what ends up happening with the Patriot Act is that it's stretched and reinterpreted in ways that legislators never intended.
Critics also say that more than 11,000 sneak and peek requests were made in 2013 alone, yet only 51 were for terrorism. The rest were linked to drug trafficking cases. When Barack Obama came to power, none of these practices changed. But after the Snowden scandal, the president suggested to reform the Patriot Act, something that didn't happen. According to opinion polls, it remains quite popular in the United States. On the 1st of June, lawmakers are expected to decide whether to renew it or not.
Moving now to Cuba, where dozens of political prisoners have been freed as part of a deal with the United States. The two countries recently agreed to normalise relations after decades of hostility. In this report, we take a look at whether this could herald a new era of political freedom on the island. Mark Thompson has the story.
Heidi Gallardo and Angel Figueredo have only been out of prison a week, yet they're already back doing what first got them arrested, standing up to the Cuban government. The married couple were released alongside some 51 other political prisoners as part of Havana's historic deal to renew ties with Washington. Opposition groups say many of those had been freed before the agreement was announced, while others were already scheduled for release. Some former inmates also claim to have been told to cease their political activities or face going back to prison.
I'm on probation. It means that my freedom is only conditional until they decide what they want to do with me. I can be detained once again. They can come here, get me and put me back in prison.
1 month after Washington announced it had renewed diplomatic ties with Cuba, many here in Havana are still waiting for signs of change.
The only change I've seen is that they released the prisoners. I hope that little by little we'll see changes, but it can't happen from one day to the next.
Talks to end a half-century-old trade embargo between the US and Cuba are ongoing. In total, Havana estimates the ban has cost the country around 100 billion euros. As part of the deal, the government is also asking to be taken off Washington's list of countries sponsoring terrorism. Some analysts say although change is slow coming, things have improved.
I think that there will be a normalization process which will be very long and slow, but there's been a positive change right away. There's less pressure on the Cuban economy, less pressure on the Cuban government, and this should help improve things considerably.
While Cuban leader Raul Castro faces a re-energized and regrouped opposition, Obama faces his own challenges. The US president can't repeal the laws enforcing the embargo without Congress's intervention. Many lawmakers in the Republican-dominated House openly oppose the changes, meaning it might still be some time before Cuba comes in from the cold.
It's 5 years since an earthquake killed tens of thousands of people in Haiti. Well, in the capital, Port-au-Prince, as with elsewhere, homes are being rebuilt. But as this report shows, for some, the more permanent scars will never heal.
This part of La Piste camp in Port-au-Prince was set up nearly 5 years ago to provide free basic housing to some of those who were disabled in the 2010 earthquake. Jean-Baptiste is one of them. He was working in a shop when the quake struck. As he was trying to get out, a wall collapsed, trapping his leg, which later had to be amputated. He and his 4 children now struggle to survive.
Because of my amputated leg, even though I'd like to go to work, I can't. Sometimes people give me some food for the kids, but sometimes they can go for days without eating.
The houses are basic plywood structures that are now 5 years old, with no running water or electricity. But Jean-Baptiste says things could be worse.
I'm happy that I have a house, even though I don't have the means to live on. I'm hungry and there are other difficulties for me and the kids. But I'm very happy to have the house, because if I didn't, we'd be living on the streets.
An estimated 4,000 people lost limbs in the earthquake. Such a large number of new amputees has changed attitudes here, according to the director of the local branch of the charity Handicap International.
It made people realize that this could happen to anyone. The earthquake affected all levels of society, so everyone recognized that all of a sudden a mishap like an earthquake or a car accident could make someone an amputee and affect a whole family.
Haiti's resources were overwhelmed by the influx of new amputees after the earthquake, and there's still a great need for prosthetic limb technicians and other experts. James is learning the skills needed to help amputees walk again. He himself lost a leg in the quake, but can now walk unassisted thanks to a prosthesis, and hopes to qualify as a technician in early 2015.
When I treat those who have been handicapped, be they upper body or lower body amputees, or those with spinal problems, as a victim of the earthquake myself, it gives me the courage to help them. It brings it right back to me.
When the quake happened, there were only around a dozen trained amputee specialists in the country. If these students pass their exams, they'll be helping to make Haiti less dependent on outside expertise for those still affected by the events of January 2010.
Foie gras is back on the menu in California. The French delicacy was outlawed in the US state for 18 months, but this week a judge overturned a ban, calling it unconstitutional. Top chefs are already planning to serve up this rich pâté, but animal rights activists are not impressed. They cite the cruelty used to produce foie gras, which involves force-feeding geese and ducks. Looks like both sides of the table could be set for a showdown in 2015. And finally, our advice, go easy on the foie gras if you want to lose weight. Many of us started this new year with a promise to eat more healthily. But in the United States, obesity is becoming an epidemic. 67% of the population is now clinically overweight. And the government is asking fast food joints to be honest about the amount of fat and calories that there is in the food they serve. Our team in California have this report.
Roger Legg has an appointment in this Los Angeles pastry shop. His job is to measure the calorie count of a meal or product.
So this is the main recipe.
And since the new FDA regulation, he's swamped. In the kitchen, the test is done on a computer.
And egg whites, 650 grams.
The result, 200 calories for this meringue cake. Information that will soon have to appear on their menu.
The FDA is requiring that by December 1st, 2015, that the calories be posted for each product. Hopefully, they'll be able to look at the calories, proteins, carbohydrates, and make some, better judgments.
The test costs 140 euros for each product, a substantial amount for this French chef who has no other choice but to comply.
There's real importance surrounding what we eat today. You can't really do any old thing these days.
In the U.S., where 67% of the population is overweight, officials are trying to fight obesity. But the government faces a big challenge: fast food chains, none of which accepted our interview request. For health professionals, this new regulation is a step in the right direction, although it's not quite enough.
There's so much more information that they need to have about fiber, about sodium levels, about saturated fat content. And if the consumer doesn't know about any of these things, then how can they make good choices?
Preventing obesity is the goal of this public school in California, where students grow their own vegetable garden.
This is so good. It's like, so what if a hamburger tastes better? This is good for you, baby.
Those lessons are also being taught in the classroom, where a chef comes to educate students about nutrition. Today's menu is quite basic: a mixed salad with a fresh smoothie, appealing for some, not really for others. Here, they develop a nutritious meal plan that's not just based on calorie amounts.
A banana is 90 calories and a slice of white bread is 90 calories. Which is the better choice? When I'm trying to get to the parents, they're busy, they just feel exhausted already, trying to implement something new, and then their kids are negative about it. Or if we work the reverse way with the kids, they're the ones who left. Their eyes are big and bright.
Started by nonprofit organizations, this type of program is rare, yet the figures are alarming. Over the last 30 years, the obesity level has increased 4-fold in the U.S.
Well, that's it for this edition of Inside the Americas. Thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.